Captain Nathan Elias stood before the mirror in his quarters and adjusted his dress uniform for the third time that morning. The dark blue fabric was pressed to perfection, and every metal sat exactly where it should be. His hands were steady, but his mind raced with possibilities. Today would change everything for humanity. Today the Galactic Council would finally hear what Earth had to offer. The journey to Viridian Prime had taken 6 weeks through the fastest routes humanity knew. The Endeavor was Earth's finest diplomatic vessel, and Nathan had commanded her for 3 years now. During that time he had visited 17 different worlds and made peaceful contact with 9 alien species. Each time he had been careful and respectful. Each time he had shown that humans could be trusted. Each time he had hoped it would lead to this moment. Lieutenant Kelly Morrison knocked on his door and entered when he called. She carried a data tablet and wore her own dress uniform. Kelly had been his second officer since the Endeavor launched, and she knew him well enough to see the tension in his shoulders. She did not comment on it. Instead, she handed him the tablet and ran through the final checklist. The speech was loaded and ready. Ambassador Gregory Stone had reviewed it 4 times. Every word had been chosen with care. Every sentence had been tested against the cultural databases of all 47 council species. Nothing in it should offend anyone. Everything in it should show humanity's value as a potential member. Nathan took the tablet and read through the speech one more time. It began with gratitude for the invitation. It acknowledged the Council's long history and their achievements. Then it moved into what humanity could offer: trade routes through human space, cultural exchanges that would benefit everyone, defensive pacts that would make the borders safer, scientific cooperation on problems too large for one species alone. It was 17 minutes of carefully crafted diplomacy. Kelly watched him read, and when he looked up, she gave him a small smile. She believed in this mission as much as he did. They both did. The entire crew did. Earth had worked for 200 years to reach the stars, and now they were finally ready to join the greater community. This was the moment everything had been building toward. Nathan handed the tablet back and straightened his uniform one last time. Ambassador Stone was waiting in the shuttle bay. They would go down to the surface together, but only Nathan would speak. That had been decided weeks ago. The Council had specifically requested Earth's senior ship captain. They wanted to hear from someone who had actually been out among the stars. Someone who had met other species and proven themselves capable. The shuttle ride down to Viridian Prime took 20 minutes. Nathan sat in silence and watched the planet grow larger in the viewport. It was beautiful in a way that made his chest tight. 3 purple moons hung in a green sky. The cities below gleamed like crystal. This was the heart of galactic civilization. This was where 47 species came together to maintain peace and prosperity across 300 star systems. Ambassador Stone sat across from him and did not try to make conversation. Gregory knew when to stay quiet. He was a good diplomat, and he had prepared Nathan well for this moment. But even Gregory seemed nervous. His fingers tapped against his knee in a rhythm that matched Nathan's own heartbeat. The landing pad was enormous and empty except for their shuttle. A guide waited for them. The creature was tall and thin, with 4 arms and skin that shifted colors as it moved. It spoke through a translation device in perfect English and welcomed them to Viridian Prime. Then it led them into the council building. The halls were wide enough to accommodate species of all sizes. Nathan saw beings that floated instead of walked. He saw creatures with 6 legs and others with none. The architecture was designed to make everyone comfortable, and it succeeded. Everything about this place spoke of cooperation and mutual respect. The guide brought them to a waiting room outside the council chambers. It explained that Nathan would be called when the council was ready. Ambassador Stone would watch from an observation deck. Nathan would stand alone on the speaking platform. That was protocol. Each species sent 1 representative to address the council, and that representative stood alone to show they spoke for their entire people. Nathan waited for 40 minutes. He used the time to center himself and go over the speech in his mind. He knew every word by heart now. He knew where to pause for emphasis. He knew where to make eye contact with specific council members whose species were known to value direct gaze. He had practiced this hundreds of times. The guide returned and gestured for him to follow. Ambassador Stone squeezed his shoulder once and then headed toward the observation deck. Nathan walked alone down a long corridor that ended at massive doors. The doors opened silently and he stepped into the council chambers. The room took his breath away. It was a crystalline dome that seemed to touch the sky itself. Light poured through in colors Nathan had no names for. The chamber was circular and representatives from 47 species sat in rings that rose up toward the ceiling. At the center of it all was the speaking platform, a small round stage with a podium that held a translation matrix. Nathan walked to the platform. His footsteps echoed in the vast space. Every eye in the chamber followed him. He could feel the weight of their attention. He reached the podium and placed his hands on either side of it. The translation matrix hummed to life. He began to speak. His voice was steady and clear. The translation matrix carried his words to every species in their own language. He thanked them for the invitation. He spoke of Earth's journey to the stars. He outlined what humanity could offer. He detailed trade proposals and cultural exchanges. He spoke of defensive pacts and scientific cooperation. He kept his tone respectful but confident. He made eye contact with representatives around the chamber. He followed every piece of advice Gregory had given him. 17 minutes later, he finished. He had delivered every word exactly as planned. Now came the moment he had been waiting for. Now the council would respond. Now they would ask questions or offer comments or begin the discussion that would lead to Earth's membership. Nothing happened. The representatives sat in their seats and looked at him. Nobody spoke. Nobody moved. Nathan waited for someone to say something. The silence stretched from seconds into a minute. He checked the translation matrix. The indicator lights showed it was working perfectly. He cleared his throat and asked if there were any questions. His voice echoed in the chamber and died away. Still nobody spoke. Nathan felt the first flutter of confusion in his chest. Perhaps he had misunderstood some protocol. Perhaps there was a waiting period he did not know about. He asked if his presentation had been clear. He asked if he had offended anyone. He asked if there was a problem with his translation matrix. The council representatives continued to stare at him in absolute silence. 5 minutes became 10. 10 became 15. Nathan stood on the platform and felt confusion turn to concern. Something was wrong. This was not normal. Ambassador Stone would be watching from the observation deck. He would be as confused as Nathan was. But there was nothing either of them could do except wait. 20 minutes passed. Then 25. Nathan's concern transformed into something else. Something darker. He began to understand. This was not a technical problem. This was not a cultural misunderstanding. This was deliberate. The council had summoned Earth's representative across 300 light years. They had made him prepare for weeks. They had made him stand before them and bear his people's hopes and dreams. And now they simply stared at him in silence. It was not indifference. Indifference would have meant canceling the meeting. This was something worse. This was contempt. This was a message carefully crafted to wound. The council was telling him that humanity was so far beneath their notice that even rejection was too much effort. 30 minutes after he finished speaking, Nathan made his decision. His hands were steady as he reached up and removed the captain's insignia from his collar. He placed it carefully on the podium. The small piece of metal clinked softly in the silence. Then he turned and walked away from the speaking platform. His footsteps echoed as he crossed the chamber floor. The massive doors opened before him. He walked through them without looking back. In the corridor outside, he activated his communicator. Lieutenant Kelly Morrison answered immediately from the Endeavour in orbit. Nathan spoke 4 words. His voice was calm and cold and utterly final. "Get us out now." The Endeavour broke orbit from Viridian Prime within the hour. Lieutenant Kelly Morrison had the ship ready to jump before Nathan even reached the bridge. She took one look at his face and knew better than to ask questions. Ambassador Gregory Stone sat in the observation room with his head in his hands. The diplomatic mission that was supposed to change everything had ended in complete failure. The journey back to Earth took 6 weeks, and Nathan spent most of it writing his report. Every detail had to be documented. Every second of that silent chamber had to be recorded for the record. He wrote it all down in clear, simple language. He described the council chamber and the representatives and the terrible weight of their collective silence. He described standing there for 30 minutes while they stared at him without speaking. He described the moment he understood what they were doing. Kelly read the report before he sent it, and her hands shook with anger when she finished. She wanted to know what humanity would do. Nathan told her he did not know, but whatever it was would not be his decision to make. He was just a ship captain. The people back on Earth would decide how to respond. The report reached Earth 3 days before the Endeavour did. President Helen Carter read it twice and then called an emergency meeting with her entire cabinet. General Marcus Webb commanded Earth's Space Defense Force, and he was in the room when she read portions of the report aloud. His face grew darker with every sentence. Secretary of State Linda Hayes urged caution. She argued that there had to be an explanation. Perhaps the Council had different customs that humanity did not understand. Perhaps silence was some form of deliberation. Perhaps they should send another delegation to clarify the situation. General Webb disagreed loudly. He said the Council had shown exactly what they thought of humanity, and there was no need to clarify anything. He wanted to begin military preparations immediately. He wanted every ship in the fleet upgraded and armed. He wanted humanity ready for whatever came next. President Carter listened to both arguments and made her decision. She ordered Nathan to testify before the World Congress when he returned. The people of Earth deserved to hear directly what happened. After that, she would decide on the next steps. The Endeavour. Docked at Luna Station 40, 2 days after leaving Viridian Prime. Nathan barely had time to step off the ship before he was escorted to a secure transport heading to Earth. Kelly went with him. Ambassador Stone went with him. They all sat in silence during the descent. The World Congress chamber was packed with representatives from every nation and every colony. Mars sent 12 delegates. Luna sent 8. The Titan settlement sent 3. Even the small mining colonies in the asteroid belt sent observers. Everyone wanted to hear what had happened. Nathan stood at the central podium and told his story. He spoke for an hour without notes. He described the preparation and the hope. He described the council chambers and the moment he finished his speech. He described the silence that followed. He described standing there waiting for any response at all. He described the slow, terrible realization that the silence was the response. When he finished speaking, the chamber erupted. Delegates shouted questions. Some demanded immediate action. Others called for restraint. The speaker had to call for order 3 times before the noise died down enough for the session to continue. The testimony was broadcast live across every human settlement. People watched in homes and bars and public squares. The reaction was immediate and volcanic. Protests started within hours. On Mars, colonists marched through the dome cities carrying signs demanding respect. On Luna, workers walked off their jobs and gathered at the Earth observation decks. The Titan colonies issued a joint statement, calling for economic sanctions against any species that traded with the Council. The younger generation was especially angry. They had been born in space and raised on stories of humanity's potential among the stars. They had grown up believing that one day they would stand as equals with other civilizations. Now they learned that those civilizations considered them beneath notice. President Carter watched the protests grow and knew she had to act. She called Nathan to her office along with General Webb and Secretary Hayes. She asked Nathan what he thought humanity should do. Nathan said he was a ship captain, not a politician, but if she wanted his opinion, he would give it. He said humanity had 2 choices. They could accept the Council's judgment and stay quiet in their own corner of space, or they could prove the Council wrong. They could show that humanity deserved respect whether the Council wanted to give it or not. President Carter asked what proving them wrong would look like. Nathan said it would mean becoming strong enough that the Council could not ignore them. It would mean building up their fleet and their colonies and their technology until humanity could not be dismissed. General Webb agreed immediately. He laid out a plan for military expansion. He wanted new shipyards built. He wanted weapons research accelerated. He wanted every able-bodied person trained in basic combat. He called it Project Defiance. Secretary Hayes argued against it. She said military buildup would make the Council see humanity as a threat. She said it would lead to conflict. She said humanity should focus on diplomatic outreach to individual Council species who might be sympathetic or... President Carter listened to both arguments. Again, and this time she sided with General Webb. She authorized Project Defiance. She put Admiral Claire Donovan in charge of coordinating the entire effort. She gave them whatever resources they needed. Nathan was offered a position at the Naval Academy teaching tactics to the next generation of officers. He accepted, but requested to also remain on the active duty roster. He wanted to be available if humanity needed experienced combat commanders. Admiral Donovan agreed and assigned him as a consultant to the fleet modernization program. The work began immediately. Chief Engineer Daniel Cross led teams that tore apart existing ships and rebuilt them with new technology. They had been working on experimental weapon systems for years but had never deployed them. Now those experiments became priorities: railguns that fired projectiles at incredible speeds, shield systems that could absorb energy weapons, missile pods that could launch from unexpected angles. The shipyards above Earth and Mars ran at full capacity. New vessels came off the construction lines every week. The designs were different from Council ships. Human engineers had studied every scan and every interaction. They built ships that would fight in ways the Council would not expect. Meanwhile, the Council noticed humanity's reaction. They watched the protests and the military buildup. They issued a statement classifying humans as Category 7 species. It was a bureaucratic designation that meant limited technology and no diplomatic standing. More importantly, it meant human ships had no right to use Council-controlled space lanes. Trade routes that human merchants had used for years were suddenly closed. Freighters that tried to pass through were turned back by Council patrol ships. Human colonies on the edge of known space found themselves cut off from supply lines that passed through Council territory. Then came the incidents that changed everything. A human mining operation on the Vesta colony reported being fired upon by a Kraloth patrol ship. The miners had been working an asteroid field they had claimed for 3 years. The Kraloth said the area was now a Council security zone, and humans were not permitted. 2 human freighters vanished near the Proxima relay station. They had been carrying supplies to the colonies on Proxima Centauri b. Search teams found debris but no survivors. The debris showed signs of weapons fire. President Carter demanded explanations from the Council. She sent formal requests through every diplomatic channel humanity had. The Council sent no response. Once again, they answered humanity with silence. The final provocation came 6 months after Nathan's testimony. The Council issued an edict claiming mineral rights to the helium, 3 mining operations in the outer Sol system. They cited an ancient treaty that supposedly gave them authority over all resource extraction in systems with Category 7 species. It was obvious theft. Every legal expert humanity had said the treaty did not apply. Even if it did, the Council had never enforced it before. They were testing humanity. They were seeing if humans would submit or resist. President Carter called another emergency meeting. This time the decision was unanimous. General Webb and Secretary Hayes both agreed. Admiral Donovan agreed. Nathan agreed. Even the peace advocates in Congress agreed. Earth rejected the Council's claim. President Carter issued a statement saying humanity would defend all its assets and all its rights. She ordered the Space Defense Force to turn back any Council vessels that tried to enforce the illegal edict. She said human ships would use force if necessary. The Council sent a fleet to Neptune to take the mining platforms by force. Admiral Claire Donovan prepared to meet them. The Council fleet arrived at Neptune 3 days after President Carter's statement. 28 warships from 5 different species dropped out of faster-than-light travel near the ice giant's outer ring. They came expecting an easy victory. They came believing humans would see their numbers and surrender the mining platforms without a fight. Admiral Claire Donovan commanded the human defense fleet from the bridge of the carrier Valiant. She had 63 ships, but most of them were smaller vessels. Destroyers and frigates and patrol craft. Against the Council's battle cruisers and heavy destroyers, they looked outmatched. The numbers said humanity should lose this fight. Nathan Elias stood on the bridge of the destroyer Relentless and watched the Council fleet form up on his tactical display. He was back in a captain's chair after 6 months of training new officers and consulting on ship designs. Admiral Donovan had called him personally. She said she needed experienced commanders who would not panic when the shooting started. She said she needed people who understood what this fight meant. Lieutenant Kelly Morrison served as his tactical officer. She had turned down her own command to stay with Nathan. She knew his methods and he knew hers. They worked together like parts of the same machine. Lieutenant Commander Stephen Blake managed the engineering station. He was young but brilliant, and he had helped design the new shield systems every human ship now carried. The Council fleet broadcast their demand on all frequencies. They ordered human ships to withdraw immediately. They ordered the mining platforms evacuated. They gave humanity 1 hour to comply. The message was delivered in flat, emotionless tones by a translator matrix. Admiral Donovan waited exactly 30 seconds before responding. She told the Council fleet they were in human territory without authorization. She told them their claim to the mining rights was illegal. She told them to turn around and leave. She gave them 1 hour to comply. The Council fleet commander must have thought she was joking. The reply came back almost immediately. The Council had superior numbers and superior firepower. Resistance would be met with overwhelming force. Human ships would be disabled and crews would be taken into custody. The mining platforms would be seized. Admiral Donovan's response was to light up every targeting system in the human fleet. 63 ships locked weapons on the Council vessels. Fire control systems went active. Missile tubes loaded. Railgun capacitors charged. The tactical displays lit up like Christmas trees. Nathan watched his own weapons board come alive. The Relentless had 6 railgun turrets and 40 missile tubes. Not much compared to a Council battlecruiser, but enough to hurt. Kelly called out targets and assigned firing solutions. Stephen rerouted power to forward shields and prepared the emergency systems. The hour passed in tense silence. Neither side moved. Neither side blinked. Then the Council fleet opened fire. The first salvo came from their heavy destroyers. Plasma bolts that burned bright enough to see with naked eyes crossed the space between the fleets. They struck human shields, expecting to punch through and cripple the ships behind them. Instead, the enhanced shields absorbed the impacts. The energy dispersed across the shield matrices. The human ships rocked but held. Return fire came instantly. Railgun rounds accelerated to incredible speeds. The Council point defense systems were calibrated for plasma weapons and energy beams. They were not ready for solid projectiles moving faster than their sensors could track. The first Council destroyer took 3 hits to its forward section and went dark. Secondary explosions rippled along its hull. The battle became chaos within minutes. The Council fleet tried to use their standard tactics. They formed defensive clusters where ships could support each other with overlapping fire. Human ships responded by breaking into small attack groups. They used Neptune's rings for cover. They fired from unexpected angles. They moved faster than Council sensors predicted. Nathan led a wing of 6 destroyers in the attack run against the Council's left flank. They accelerated hard and came in low relative to the orbital plane. Kelly launched missiles in a spread pattern that forced the Council ships to divide their point defense. While they were busy with the missiles, Nathan's railguns opened up at close range. The Relentless shook with each shot. Stephen called out shield status as Council return fire found them. The forward shields dropped to 60%, then 40%. Nathan ordered a hard turn that used Neptune's gravity to slingshot them away from the heaviest fire. The maneuver worked, but 2 other destroyers in his wing were not as lucky. One took a direct hit from a Kraloth cruiser and broke apart. The other lost power and went into a tumbling spin. Admiral Donovan coordinated the overall battle from the Valiant. She moved her carrier groups to support ships that were taking heavy damage. She rotated damaged vessels out of the line and brought fresh ships forward. She adapted her tactics constantly as she learned what worked and what did not. The Council had more firepower, but humanity had prepared for this. Every human captain knew their ships inside and out. Every crew had trained for months. Every system had been upgraded and tested. They fought like people who had something to prove. 2 hours into the battle, the Council flagship took critical damage. A human missile pod had launched from behind a chunk of ice in the rings. The missiles came in so close that point defense had no time to react. 3 struck the flagship's command section. The Council fleet commander had to transfer to another vessel. The fighting continued for another 2 hours. Ships on both sides took damage. The space around Neptune filled with debris and frozen atmosphere venting from breached hulls. Nathan's Relentless lost its aft shields completely when a Kraloth cruiser caught them broadside. Stephen worked miracles keeping the engines running. Kelly kept targeting solutions flowing even as consoles sparked and failed around her. Nathan saw 5 human ships destroyed. He saw twice that many damaged badly enough to withdraw from the fight. But he also saw Council ships retreating. He saw their formations breaking apart. He saw their commanders making mistakes as they tried to adapt to human tactics they had never encountered. The turning point came when Nathan led another attack run against a group of Council support ships. These were the vessels that supplied power and ammunition to the warships. Kelly identified them on the tactical display. Nathan took his remaining destroyers straight at them. The Council tried to protect their support ships, but human missiles overwhelmed their defenses. 2 support vessels exploded. A third lost power and began drifting. The Council warships suddenly found themselves running low on ammunition and energy. Their plasma weapons needed enormous power. Their shields required constant supply. Without the support ships, they could not maintain a prolonged fight. Admiral Donovan saw the same thing Nathan did. She pressed the attack. She committed her reserves. She pushed damaged ships to stay in the fight just a little longer. The human fleet hit the Council line with everything they had left. 4 hours after the battle started, the Council fleet began to withdraw. They did not retreat in an organized fashion. They simply broke off and ran. Some jumped to faster than light immediately. Others limped away on damaged engines. They left behind 7 destroyed ships. 11 more were so badly damaged they could barely move. The human fleet did not pursue. Admiral Donovan ordered her ships to hold position and secure the mining platforms. Nathan brought the Relentless back to the Valiant and docked for emergency repairs. The destroyer's hull was scarred with burn marks. 2 of the railgun turrets were offline. The aft section had holes big enough to walk through. Kelly slumped in her chair when the all-clear sounded. Stephen lay on the deck next to the engineering console, too exhausted to stand. Nathan sat in his captain's chair and stared at the tactical display. The human fleet had lost 9 ships. 23 more were damaged. But they had held. They had defended Neptune against superior numbers. Admiral Donovan sent a message to all ships. She congratulated them on their victory. She told them they had done something no one thought possible. They had beaten a Council fleet in open combat. She told them to repair what they could and prepare for whatever came next, because everyone knew this was just the beginning. The Council would not accept defeat. They would send more ships. They would come back with overwhelming force. The war had started, and it would not end with one battle. Nathan knew it too. He looked at Kelly and Stephen and saw the same knowledge in their eyes. They had won today, but the cost had been high. How many more battles could humanity win before they ran out of ships and crews? But that was a question for another day. Today they had proven something important. They had shown the Council that humanity would fight. They had shown that humans could win. The Battle of Neptune's Gate became legend. It was the first time humanity had defeated Council forces in open warfare. It would not be the last. The war lasted 18 months and touched 40 star systems. The Council expected to crush human resistance within weeks. Instead, they found themselves fighting an enemy that refused to break, no matter how hard they were hit. Every battle taught humanity new lessons. Every defeat made them stronger. Every victory cost the Council more than they expected to pay. Nathan Elias fought in 14 major battles and more small engagements than he could count. The Relentless was destroyed in the 5th month at the Battle of Proxima. Nathan and most of his crew survived, but Lieutenant Commander Stephen Blake died keeping the engines running long enough to get them to the escape pods. Nathan requested and received command of a new ship. They named her Indomitable, and she was bigger and more powerful than the Relentless had been. Lieutenant Kelly Morrison earned her own command after the Yai Battle of Tau Ceti. She led a frigate squadron that specialized in deep raids behind Council lines. Her ships would jump into Council territory and hit supply depots and communication stations before jumping out again. The Council never knew where she would strike next. They called her squadron the Ghost Fleet. Admiral Claire Donovan coordinated the overall war effort from Earth. She worked 18-hour days planning operations and managing resources. General Marcus Webb handled the production side. He pushed the shipyards to build faster. He pushed the weapons labs to innovate. Chief Engineer Daniel Cross and his teams worked around the clock repairing damaged ships and installing new systems. President Helen Carter faced the political challenges. The war economy strained every colony. Resources that should have gone to civilian needs went to military production. There were shortages of basic goods. There were protests from peace movements who wanted negotiation. There were also extremist groups who wanted to exterminate every Council species. Carter had to walk a careful line between supporting the military and maintaining civilian control. The Council discovered that fighting humans was unlike anything they had experienced before. Human ships used tactics that seemed reckless. They would sacrifice shields for speed. They would ram damaged ships into enemy vessels if it meant taking the enemy down with them. They would fight until their ships were falling apart around them. But it was more than just tactics. Humans adapted faster than any species the Council had ever fought. A weapon that worked in one battle would be countered by the next. A strategy that succeeded once would fail the second time. Human engineers studied captured Council technology and found ways to use it against them. Human commanders learned from every engagement and shared that knowledge across the fleet. The war reached every corner of human space. The Council attacked mining colonies in the asteroid belt. They raided agricultural stations on Mars. They bombed civilian targets on Luna. Each attack was meant to break human morale. Each attack had the opposite effect. Humans became more determined. Recruitment stations were flooded with volunteers. Factory workers stayed at their jobs for double shifts without being asked. Nathan saw the cost of the war in the faces of his crew. They were exhausted. They were scared. Some of them had lost friends and family, but they kept fighting because they believed in what they were defending. They believed humanity deserved respect. They believed surrender meant accepting that they were inferior. The war also revealed cracks in the Council itself. 3 species had voted against the declaration of war. The Varani argued that the conflict was unnecessary. The Toth said humanity should be given a chance to negotiate. The small Pindari delegation abstained entirely. As the war dragged on and casualties mounted, more Council members began to question the decision. The turning point came at the Battle of Kepler Station. The station was humanity's largest deep space shipyard. It orbited a red dwarf star 40 light-years from Earth. The Council knew that if they destroyed Kepler Station, humanity's ability to replace lost ships would be crippled. They assembled a massive fleet for the attack. 50 warships from 8 different species. Admiral Donovan committed everything to the defense. She pulled ships from patrol duties across human space. She called in every favor she had. She even accepted help from Kelly Morrison's squadron, despite knowing it would leave the supply raids uncovered. The defense fleet numbered 37 ships. Against 50 Council vessels, it was not enough. Nathan commanded the forward defensive line with 15 capital ships. His orders were simple. Hold as long as possible. Make the Council pay for every meter of space. Buy time for the station to evacuate civilians and finish the ships under construction in the yards. The Council fleet came in hard and fast. They knew they had superior numbers and they used them. They split into 3 groups and attacked from different angles. Nathan's ships tried to block all 3 approaches, but they were spread too thin. Council fire hammered the human defensive line. Ships took critical damage. Shields failed. Crews died. The Indomitable fought at the center of the line where the pressure was heaviest. Nathan rotated his ship constantly to keep fresh shields facing the enemy. His railguns fired until the barrels glowed red. His missile tubes launched until they were empty. Around him, other human ships fought just as hard. They held for 2 hours against impossible odds. Then sections of Kepler Station started taking hits. Council ships had broken through the defensive line. They targeted the civilian habitats first. 3,000 people lived on that station. Families of the shipyard workers, scientists and engineers, children who had been born in space and never seen Earth. Nathan saw the habitat sections explode on his tactical display. He heard the screams on the emergency channels. He made a decision that would haunt him for the rest of his life. He pulled 6 ships out of the defensive line and threw them at the Council vessels attacking the civilians. It was a suicide run. Everyone knew it. They went anyway. The Indomitable led the charge. They came in at maximum acceleration with all weapons firing. They hit the Council ship so hard and fast that the enemy did not have time to react. 3 Council destroyers were destroyed. 2 more were crippled. But the cost was terrible. 5 of the 6 human ships were destroyed. Only the Indomitable survived, and she was barely holding together. Then Kelly Morrison arrived with her squadron. She had pushed her ships beyond their rated limits to get there. Her Ghost Fleet came out of faster-than-light travel right on top of the Council's rear guard. The surprise was complete. She tore through their support ships before they knew she was there. The Council fleet suddenly found itself under attack from 2 directions. Their formations broke apart. Their coordination failed. Admiral Donovan saw the opening and committed her reserves. Fresh human ships poured into the battle. The tide turned. The Council fleet fought for another hour, but their momentum was gone. They had expected an easy victory. Instead, they were in a grinding battle with an enemy that would not quit. Their casualties mounted. Their ammunition ran low. Their commanders began to disagree about what to do next. Finally, the Council fleet withdrew. They left behind 12 destroyed ships and 7 more too damaged to jump to faster than light. The human fleet was shattered, but they had held. Kepler Station was scarred and 3,000 civilians were dead, but the shipyards were intact. Nathan brought the Indomitable back to dock on emergency power. The cruiser had damage to every major system. Half the crew was wounded. The ship would need months of repairs. Nathan himself had a broken arm and burns across his back. He refused medical attention until every member of his crew had been treated first. Admiral Donovan came to see him in the hospital 3 days later. She told him the Council had requested a ceasefire. She said there were representatives from species within the Council who wanted to talk about peace. She said humanity had proven something at Kepler Station. They had proven they could not be defeated. Nathan asked what the cost had been. Donovan told him. 22 human ships destroyed, 5,000 casualties including the civilians. The Indomitable would be in repair dock for 6 months. Kelly Morrison's squadron had lost 3 ships in their desperate rush to reach the battle. Nathan closed his eyes. The victory felt hollow. Yes, they had held. Yes, they had proven they could win. But the price kept getting higher. How much more could humanity endure? How many more battles before there was nothing left to defend? Donovan seemed to read his thoughts. She said the Council was finally willing to talk because they understood what Nathan had learned. Neither side could win this war. They could only bleed each other until nothing remained. The question now was whether anyone would be willing to listen. The first peace message came from an unexpected source. Ambassador Lyria of the Varani reached out through private channels to Secretary of State Linda Hayes. The message was brief but significant. Not all Council members supported the war. Some recognized that humanity could not be defeated without destroying everything the Council claimed to stand for. They wanted to talk. President Helen Carter read the message 3 times before making her decision. She would authorize secret negotiations, but only under specific conditions. First, the talks would happen on neutral ground. Second, humanity would send a small delegation that included both diplomatic and military representatives. Third, Captain Nathan Elias would be part of that delegation. Nathan was still recovering from his injuries when Admiral Claire Donovan gave him the order. His arm was healing, but he would carry the scars from Kepler Station for the rest of his life. He told Donovan he wanted to stay with his ship. The Indomitable was in repair dock and he felt responsible for seeing her restored. Donovan said this was not a request. She said if the war had started because of what happened to Nathan in that council chamber, then he needed to be there when it ended. The peace talks were scheduled at a neutral station on the edge of Varani space. The station was old and small, but it was outside council jurisdiction, and that made it acceptable to both sides. The council sent 15 representatives, including High Chancellor Voss, who had presided over that original silent meeting. Humanity sent Nathan along with Linda Hayes and Admiral Donovan, plus a small security detail. The journey took 2 weeks, and Nathan spent most of it thinking about what he would say if given the chance. He remembered standing in that chamber 18 months ago full of hope. He remembered the silence that followed his speech. He remembered the weight of their contempt. Now he was going back to face them again, but everything had changed. The negotiations began in a conference room that was too small for the number of people attending. The council representatives sat on one side of a long table. The human delegation sat on the other side. There were no opening ceremonies, no formal welcomes. Everyone knew why they were there. The council offered a ceasefire in recognition of humanity's current territorial claims. They would acknowledge human sovereignty over the Sol system and the colonies humanity controlled. In exchange, humans would agree to stay within their current borders and accept council authority over the disputed trade routes. Linda Hayes rejected the offer before the council representative finished speaking. She said humanity had not fought for 18 months, just to be told where they could and could not go. She said the council had started this war with an insult and they could not end it by pretending the insult never happened. Admiral Donovan laid out humanity's terms: full membership in the council with all rights and privileges, an official apology for the treatment Nathan received, compensation for the colonies that were damaged and the lives that were lost, open trade routes through all council space, and most importantly, an explanation of why the council had treated humanity with such contempt in the first place. The council representatives argued among themselves, loud enough for everyone to hear. It became clear there was a deep split. Some of the older species saw the war as a necessary lesson. They believed younger races needed to understand their place. Others, including the Virani and several smaller delegations, saw it as a catastrophic mistake that had cost thousands of lives for nothing but pride. The negotiations dragged on for 3 days. Both sides made small concessions, but the core issues remained. The council would not apologize. They would not explain their actions. They offered recognition and peace, but not respect. Humanity refused to accept anything less than full equality. On the 4th day, High Chancellor Voss spoke directly to Nathan for the first time since that silent chamber. He asked what humanity wanted that could possibly justify continuing the bloodshed. He said the council was offering peace and prosperity. He said humanity should be grateful for the opportunity to end the war. Nathan had been silent through all 3 days of negotiations. He had listened and watched, but he had not spoken. Now he stood and everyone in the room went quiet. He looked at High Chancellor Voss and then at each of the other council representatives. When he finally spoke, his voice was calm, but it carried the weight of everything humanity had endured. He said humanity had come to the council in good faith 18 months ago. They had sought only to join the community of civilized species. They had prepared carefully. They had followed every protocol. They had offered friendship and cooperation. In return, the council had given them silence. Nathan said the silence itself was not the true insult. The true insult came after, when humanity asked why, when they tried to understand what they had done wrong, when they sought any explanation at all. The council had remained silent even then. That was when humanity understood they were not being rejected for something they did. They were being rejected for what they were. He said humanity had not started fighting because of the silence in that chamber. They fought because when they asked why, the council would not answer. If the council could not explain why they treated humanity with such contempt, then how could humans believe they would be treated with respect tomorrow? All humanity ever wanted was to be heard. Now Nathan was asking one more time, "Why did you ignore us that day?" The conference room was absolutely silent. High Chancellor Voss looked at the other council representatives. Several of them looked away. Others watched him with expressions that Nathan could not read. Finally, Voss spoke. He said the council had not ignored humanity out of contempt. They had done it out of fear. Humanity's rate of advancement was unprecedented in all of galactic history. In 200 years, humans had gone from basic flight to faster-than-light travel. Other species took thousands of years to accomplish the same thing. The council's leadership feared that humanity would rapidly outpace everyone else. They feared humans would destabilize the careful balance of power that had maintained peace for millennia. Voss said the silence was meant to be a subtle warning, a way to slow humanity down without direct confrontation, a message that humans should be more cautious and move more slowly. The council thought if they made humanity feel unwelcome, it would make them hesitate before pushing into galactic affairs. Instead, it had sparked a war that proved all the council's fears were justified. Humanity had innovated faster than any species in recorded history. They had adapted to threats the council thought would take years to counter. They had become exactly what the council feared in less time than anyone thought possible. Ambassador Lyria spoke next. She said the council had made a terrible mistake born from fear and arrogance. She proposed a new approach. Humanity would be granted full council membership immediately, with representation equal to any other species. The council's charter would be amended to prevent any member from being silenced or dismissed. In exchange, humanity would share its methods of rapid development. They would help other struggling species advance instead of keeping the knowledge to themselves. She said humanity's rapid advancement was not a threat. It was an opportunity. If humans could help other species develop faster, then the entire galactic community would benefit. The thing the council feared most could become their greatest asset. Nathan looked at Linda Hayes and Admiral Donovan. Hayes nodded slowly. Donovan did the same. Nathan turned back to the council representatives. He extended his hand to High Chancellor Voss in the human gesture of agreement. Voss looked at the offered hand for a long moment. Then he reached out and grasped it. The handshake lasted only seconds, but it meant everything. The war that began with silence ended with a gesture of understanding. The formal peace treaty took another week to negotiate. but the important work was done. Humanity would join the Council as full members. The Council would issue a formal statement acknowledging their mistake. Reparations would be paid for the damaged colonies. Trade routes would open. The war was over. Nathan returned to Earth 6 weeks after the negotiations concluded. The Indomitable was ready to leave repair dock. Kelly Morrison came to see him off. She had been promoted to captain and given command of a new cruiser. They stood on the dock and looked at their ships, and neither of them had to say what they were thinking. They had survived. Against all odds, they had made it through. 10 years later, Admiral Nathan Elias returned to Viridian Prime as Earth's permanent ambassador to the Council. The chambers were the same crystalline dome where he had stood alone so long ago. But now he sat among the representatives as an equal. He had a voice and a vote. Most importantly, he had respect. The Council had changed in those 10 years. 3 more species had been granted membership using the new charter that prevented anyone from being silenced. Human technology and methods had been shared with struggling civilizations. The rate of advancement across the entire galactic community had increased dramatically. Nathan made sure he was present whenever a new species was brought before the Council for evaluation. He made it his mission to be the first to welcome them and the first to listen to what they had to say. He never wanted another captain to stand alone in silence, wondering if they were worthy of being heard.